We have about a couple thousand users. Most of them come self-serve. We have a few hundred enterprise customers that are using our product at scale. And then we have each one. So if you think about like the few hundred customers that I just talked about in the enterprise segment, they all have big data. We process about like 4 petabyte of data every day, which is mind-boggling to me. So last September, we announced that we were processing about 1 trillion events every single day. Now we're processing about 1.6 trillion events every single day. So just to put that in perspective, that's about 18 million events every second.
Hello, everyone. My guest today is Vijay. Vijay is the founder and CEO of Statsig, a platform for product development. He was previously vice president and head of entertainment at Facebook, and at one point was the head of Facebook's Seattle office, and spent a decade before that at Microsoft. In this conversation, we'll talk about his transformation from big tech engineer to a startup founder, his tactical insights on hiring, scaling, and building a product-led SaaS company, how modern product teams are using experimentation and rapid iteration, and also talk about what does the future of experimentation look like in an AI-first world. If this is the first time listening to Startup Project, don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you listen to the podcast. Jay, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nataraj. Good to be on your show.
So, as I was researching this conversation, I found out, I think maybe it's on the Sequoia blog post, that when you're considering leaving Facebook, Mark pinged you and asked you about, try to convince you to stay at the company. What was that moment like?
So this was not the first time. So I like tried to leave the company a couple times before then, and every single time it was a conversation that kind of like, okay, well, there's a lot to be done here. A startup is a small company. The impact you will have is like not that big, small. For all the good reasons, I stayed back at Facebook, and when it was 10 years, I knew it was like something new has to be done for just for my own personal sake. So I have felt like I need the startup in my life, so I left.
I mean, you've been in sort of big tech companies for almost 2 decades at that point. Like, what was the personal motivation? Like, did you always want to have like, I mean, there's always a personal calculus. I'm doing all this work for a company, or like, can I own more equity? Like, what was your thinking at that point?
Yeah, so I started at Microsoft. I spent about 10 years at Microsoft as a software engineer. I mean, to be completely transparent, right? So I loved Microsoft. I learned a lot. Everything that I know about software engineering, Microsoft is the best place. This was like back in early 2000s, where you learn how you build software. You kind of like learn how to predict something that's going to happen 2 years down the line, and it's kind of like a science. And there's so much to learn, so many good people. So I had a lot of good time learning all of that stuff. At some point, I had thought about like, okay, well, maybe I should go build something different. And I don't know. This is probably like something that is very common nowadays, which is like you're in a holding pattern for your green card. You can't really like leave or reset your green card. For good reason or bad, you kind of like don't really explore other options when you're in that situation. So I had to be like that for a little while. And then once I got my green card, the first thing I did was like look around, and luckily for me, Facebook was starting up an office in Seattle, and so that was my first jump from what I thought was like a really, really good learning experience for a whole decade. And then I went into Facebook. At that time, Facebook was a startup. It was like a late stage startup. It wasn't quite ready for IPO. And so I thought I was joining a very small company. I mean, like leaving behind a company that was 100,000 people to like join a company that was only like 1,000 or 1,200 people at that time was incredibly different and a good learning experience. I thought I was learning a lot at Microsoft, and then I went into Facebook. There was a completely new world. And so that's how I went from like, one big company to what I thought was a startup. And then eventually, how the story of Facebook, it grew so fast. And like by the 10 years that I was there, it had grown to like, I don't know, like 65,000 people or something like that. And so that was a lot of good learning, because when you're in a company that is growing that fast, you learn a lot and you get exposed to a lot.
And I think by the time you left, you were leading entertainment at Facebook, and also you were almost leading the Facebook Seattle office at that point.
Yeah. So One of the things that I generally do is every couple of years or so, I try something completely new. So even at Microsoft, I started with like Microsoft TV, which was like set top box for Microsoft TV devices, and then moved on to developer divisions where I was doing Visual Studio, where I was building compiler services for text editors and things like that. And then after that, I was working on SQL Server, so building databases. And then after that, Windows, so operating system. So even within Microsoft, I did various little things. And at Facebook, I started out as an engineer and I worked on Messenger and then some ads products. And then I worked on Marketplace and then gaming and entertainment. So if you look, each one of them is pretty different. They don't have like much correlation or continuation. That's kind of like how I've always operated in my career. And so when I left, I was the head of entertainment that included everything from videos, music, movies, and so on. And also the head of Seattle, which when I joined, the company was about like a couple dozen people in Seattle office. When I left, we had about 6,500 people spread across like 19 different buildings.
How, what are some of the interesting problems that you were working as head of entertainment, and what was the scale of those problems?
Yeah, head of entertainment. If you think about Facebook or now Meta, the apps that you have, there's a social aspect to it. People, your friends and your community and so on. And then there's an entertainment aspect to it, which is you just want to like spend time. You want to be entertained, and the kinds of stuff that you do for entertainment, you could watch videos, you could listen to music, you can watch music videos. You can play games, or you can watch other people play games. You can watch short clips from TV shows, and so on. So that's the way I thought about it. Like, oh, podcast, another one, huge area, which is like listening to audio. So uh, anything that is not pertaining to your social circle belongs to this entertainment category. And that was my purview. And so whenever I was thinking about the problems that you're trying to solve is like, how do you make the time people spend is of high quality? What do they gain out of it? And how do they get it entertained? High quality entertainment. That includes everything from acquiring the right kind of content, understanding what people want, and then personalizing the content to them. And then if you go on, like, removing content that is not great for the platform, anything that is violating policy, things along those lines. So you invest quite heavily in like the integrity of the platform as well. So those are the kinds of problems that you tend to solve. On the engineering side, scale is a very important problem. When you're delivering video at like 4K, high quality, high bit rate, to networks that may not be reliable, then you have like interesting engineering problems that you have to go solve. And so those are all like super exciting.
Are you primarily focused on the technology of getting the entertainment on the different Facebook platforms, or also part of, dealing with the business side of it, licensing the content, acquiring content, or, incentivizing different, entertainment companies to sort of post on Facebook?
Yeah, it was part of that too. So part of it is like when you have a product that is actually observing what people watch, and so you know what exactly people want, and then you want to like go and buy more of that content, go to the media. So we do have media procurement team and so on. So you can go to them and say like, this is the kind of content that people consume on Facebook. So let's go get more of those. So that kind of like plays into the decision of like where the company would go invest in.
So, you were doing some exciting stuff at Facebook at scale, and then you decided, it's time for you to leave and start your own company. Like, did you evaluate different set of ideas, or like the idea for Statsig was kind of brewing in your mind while you were at Facebook? Like, how did that initial thought process was like?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So my journey was the first part of the journey was like deciding to go start a company. And then the second part of the journey is like, okay, what do I go build? And so deciding to go start a company has been like brewing for a long time. And so it's one of those things that I would regret if I don't do it kind of a situation. So what to go build? It's kind of a because of my varied experience, like, doing everything from gaming to ads to marketplaces to eventually like videos. I had lots and lots of ideas about like what we could go build. When you're evaluating an idea, you want to like take into account what the market size could be, what the propensity of a buyer to like pay $1 for you, and then eventually like what are you good at. So sometimes have to like set up. Okay, I'm going to go against a lot of competitors in the industry. So what are we really good at? And then what could I bring which could be an advantage for us? And so those are all the factors that go into, which is a little bit more, if you think about like the heart is how your passion is driven. Your kind of like this logical analysis is part of your mind is how you arrive at what you go build. If you're entirely driven by passion, you may build something that may not be sellable. So those are the kinds of considerations that went into deciding, okay, I'm going to go build a developer platform that includes everything from like, decision making, and we're going to like empower everyone to make the right decisions using data.
So, once you decide on this particular sort of like an experimentation developer platform, how did you go about like getting those first couple of customers?
It's a good journey. It's a good lesson for everyone that's out there building startups. Our company usually, like when you have a founder that has an immense amount of faith and conviction that, okay, this is what I'm going to go build. I think this is going to be great for the companies and for the industry, for the people, and so you're very mission driven, and so you want to go build. And while you're building, you're talking to a lot of people, and this is the part where I made all kinds of mistakes. Where you go to someone who is willing to like spend 30 minutes with you, and then you're like, oh, look, Nataraj, I'm going to ask you, like, I'm going to go build this developer platform. I think it's going to be like pretty awesome. It's going to have all kinds of like features that will allow you to like ingest data and help you make the right decision. What are you going to say? Chances are you're going to say, oh, that sounds like a great idea. You should go do it. Right. And then you're going to like, you talk to enough people, then you build this echo chamber that you are now even more convinced that everybody that I talk to needs this platform. And then you go build it in vacuum. Like, so we did this for about 6 months, we built. And then at the end of 6 months, we're like, let's go talk to some people and like, the people that I talked to before and see if they're willing to like now start using this product. And you know what? You go to talk to them and say like, hey, you remember I told you about this thing? I have this product now. Would you use it? And what is the answer? Let me think about it. What do you mean? Let me think about it means. It's like they're not really that interested. Um, Much harder is to like have them integrate into their existing product. Much harder is to have them pay a single penny. So you learn that lesson, and so this is one of those things where when I was talking to one of co-founders at that time, a person said, you got to go read this book, The Mom Test. And I went and read the book, Mom Test, and I kind of like realized all the mistakes I was making when I was talking to customers. So the point of that is, first, you need to understand what problems people are facing, and do you have a solution for that problem? And in order to even get to that stage, you need to know who your customer is, who your ideal customer profile is. And then you talk to them, and then you make sure that the product that you're selling actually solves the problem. Not only that, you have to be the industry best for somebody to even care about your product, and then uh, open up their wallet. So those are the kind of like hard lessons that I learned over the course of the next few months. Uh, and then there's a story about like how we found the first ideal customer profile. I'll touch on that in a bit.
Then I mean, you bring up a point which I often notice when someone who's worked for, at big companies all their career and sort of transition into startups often face, and like you'll see them even in the pitch decks adding a lot of advisor names, or there are certain signals you can easily spot where, okay, this person is coming from the big tech, and you can see clearly there are certain signals. Are there any other sort of lessons, when you transition? Because when you're in a big company, there's a huge sales team, there's a whole marketing team. You're actually not spending time in, convincing a customer. The customer is already at your doors, and now you're selling them and you're improving experience. Now you're doing sort of post customer acquisition things, and very few jobs are actually, trying convincing customers. And also you have this advantage of like an ecosystem of products that are being sold. So you never you are selling one single product. So there are all these problems when you first move from a big tech company to doing a startup that, some founders are, obviously much more aware of these problems, and they're sort of adapt very quickly, but there are often like these blind spots only once you jump into it. Are there any other blind spots that you've discovered?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. When you're in a big company, a lot of things are taken care for you, right? So then, what I was doing is like I was focusing on building products. Coming from engineering, you kind of like have intuition around engineering, product, data, sometimes a lot of design intuition. But what I was lacking was this whole go-to-market intuition. Like, how do you market something, and how do you sell it? What you're describing, what the analogy that comes to my mind is like, imagine a mall where people are already visiting the mall, and then you set up a shop there, which is kind of like how it is to like build a new product from, in a large company, because you're already, all you got to do is just like open up a shop and people are going to come in, right? Whereas building a startup is kind of like scoping out a plot of land in the middle of a desert and then setting up a shop and then inviting people to come visit you where they normally don't go. And so that's the stark difference. And so that was like huge learning or lesson for me when I started, trying to sell the product. And in terms of like in a large company versus small companies, no matter this was my experience as in like, I wish I had learned more of like the business side of things. I wish I had like actually spent more time with the sales folks, how they talk, how they incentivize, how they even like think about approaching. I was extremely awkward talking about my own product to potential customers. It's one of those things where, oh, I don't want to be salesy, but I want to like actually position my product in the right way. It took a while for me to like build a conviction that, no, I'm actually helping these prospects with my product. I believe so strongly that my product is gonna be 100% valuable and going to be useful for you, then that the perspective changes. The way I talk about it changes. And so your awkwardness goes away. Those are all stuff that you got to learn. And, I learned it in real time. And some of the founders, they've like learned it before so they can like use it when they start, a new company. So, but it is one of those crutches that, when you only spend time in large companies, you don't realize this.
Well, so what was the value add when you were giving that initial 10 customers or so? Like, what was the value proposition of Statsig at that point of time? And why is it sort of like different from what solutions or products in terms of that already existed, in the market?
Yeah, so the value proposition has not changed since the day we started. The value proposition has always been the same, which is the more you know about your product, the better decisions you're going to be making. And so if I distill it down, what we're doing is we're empowering product builders. Whether you're an engineer or data scientist or a product manager, you're all building products. And the idea to like, okay, well, observe your product, how people use your product, what they care about, and where they spend more time, how many exceptions you're throwing, what is it, what is the latency, what is the engagement retention. All of those are important for you to know how your product is doing. Number one, what products or what features are not working as intended, or not hitting the mark. And then number three, use those two to know what to go build next. And that's literally what we sell as the value from day one, even now continuing on. So we're adding more and more features to our platform so that everything just operates seamlessly as a platform. And so the value add is that. The differentiation from existing products is that there are products that have been here before us, and those are all point solutions. For flagging, you need a separate product. For analytics, you need a separate product. For visualization, you need a separate one. For your warehouse analysis, you need a separate product. For experimentation, you need a separate product. And so each one of them have been individual products in the past. And what we're doing is we're bringing them all together. The benefits of that is like, number one, it like, consolidates all data into one place and you don't have to like fragment your data. Number two, because you're not fragmenting your data, they all are speaking this, they are the source of truth. They're not like saying two different things or multiple different conclusions that you're drawing from them. And then number three, it actually opens up some really interesting scenarios, as in like if you combine flagging along with analytics together, you can get impact analysis for every single feature. That's something that you can't do if you have two different products, dealing with individual solutions. If you combine
Can you
experimentation.
explain flagging, for those who might not be aware of, feature flags?
Yeah, these are feature flagging. So feature flags are ways for you to control where to launch, how to launch, to who products. So you can basically decouple code from features, so that when you want to launch new code, like you can like send it to your app store and get it app reviewed, and then once it's live, then you can turn on features completely decoupled from code releases. It's extremely powerful. Number one, it's powerful to like know when to launch your product. Number two, when something goes wrong in real time, you can turn it off. There's lots of other reasons as to doing it, because you can do rollouts at scale, so you don't turn on like to 100% everywhere, but you can do like 2%, 4%, 8%, just to know that all the metrics that you care about are still sound.
And pretty much every scalable service today, uses some version of this because you don't want to
Oh
roll
yeah.
out to 100% of your users and blow up your servers at one single point of time. And you want to experiment different versions of the products. So all this is sort of like standard common technique today for across like all major companies, right? So you have some, pretty well impressive companies as your customers. You have OpenAI. I think you have Whatnot, you have Blue Sky, which is the ex-competitor. Are there any specific trends like across the big and small companies on like how they're approaching just experimentation or product validation that you see?
Yeah. So if you the trend that we are betting on is that more and more product development is going to be data driven, and that's the reason why we're here. And what we're doing in the industry is we're accelerating that trend. So if you think about like the content that we put out, the education that we do to prospects and in general to the industry, we're basically catalyzing and accelerating that. Product development used to be this siloed thing where a product manager comes up with an idea, and then the engineers code it, testers test it, and then you ship it, and then you wait for 2 years, and then another release cycle happens. This is how product development used to happen. And then now it's a very iterative process, and people ship like, sometimes weekly, daily, and sometimes even hourly. And in order to like, get to that level of like speed, you need to have controls in place, and to be able to like allow people to make distributed decisions, you need to have ability for you to like know how each line of code that you wrote is performing. And so these tools are getting more adoption day by day, and people that are like starting to move from this traditional way of development to this modern way of development, they all need it. And so if one of the bet is that AI is going to accelerate that movement of product development, because you're going to have like lots of rich software that is built from like blocks that you've just like assembled together, and either you or AI is assembling these blocks together. And now you need to know, is your hypothesis or is your original idea actually what turned out to be the product? And so by if not, how much? And so you need these observability tools built into your product to be able to know. And so I think generally this trend is moving towards like data driven development. You can also see more and more, if you look at like LinkedIn, more and more companies are setting up growth teams. More and more companies are hiring data scientists. Those are like great trends that we observe.
So what is the right time for a company to adopt Statsig? Like, is it like a, Series A company? I think it also goes back to that customer profile that you were talking about, right? Like, what is the ideal customer profile for you, like when a company starts adopting Statsig?
Yeah, so Statsig as a platform, we have many different products, right? So there's feature flagging, there's experimentation, there's product analytics, and so on. You should start on day one. Every feature that you're building, on day one. I remember the few days of like early days of like us building software, because I'm looking at our the first thing we launched was our website, our marketing site, and I'm like refreshing that page all the time. And whenever I get somebody visited the website, I'm looking at them, I'm seeing the session replay of them. I'm like literally spending all my time like figuring out how people are using the product. And so that is an important step in the journey of your company. So start on day one, integrate with feature flags, integrate product analytics, integrate session replay, and all of that stuff that will actually give you insights into how users are using your product. Eventually you'll get to like the place where, okay, I want to run experiments, right? So you don't have to like do experiments on day one. Eventually you'll get there. And so when you get there, you have the same tool with all the same data, with historic data. Now capable of like running experiments, and because it has historic data, it could do corrections and things a lot, sometimes some of these advanced statistical methods a lot more efficiently. So yeah, there's no early time. Just start right away.
One of the, I mean, I've used different experimentation tools because I also work in big tech. One of the sort of negative side effects I see when we have, I mean, the tooling is great. Every tool has its purpose, but I think a lot of this idea that we'll use A/B testing or because with tools like Statsig and others, there's often this idea that anytime there is a sort of product sense decision, there's always okay, let's take two versions and experiment and see which ones comes best. So I often feel like there's it can lead to a little bit of incrementalism and sort of like experimentation fatigue. Because if you see like a product like ChatGPT, like it's such an experimental product. Like if you discuss that some and try to pitch internally at a big tech company or in any normal company, like people will have 100 ideas that the name is bad, the UI doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So, like, do you have a take on like when to use sort of experimentation versus when to use your gut and your product sense, um, when you're doing product development?
So you remember the famously misattributed quote from Henry Ford that said, like, if I'd asked people what they needed, they would have said faster horses and not a car. Just to think about it, right? Experimentation is not a replacement for product intuition. You're not going to like get rid of product. You do need product intuition. So in order to make those leaps from like a faster horse to a car, you cannot experiment your way there. You need people with lots of good intuition and drive to be able to like get to that kind of like leaps. But then once you had your first version of the car, you remember the Model T to where we are now. Um, there has been thousands, if not millions, of improvements that have been made, and those are all like in a way I think is like you can experiment and find better versions of like what you currently have. Even in there, there's lots of like leaps that require product intuition. So my my philosophy is like product intuition and experimentation go hand in hand. Some of these things, you can have product intuition, you kind of like want to build it and you have conviction, you go do it. But then when you're like about to launch it, just make sure that there are no side effects. Things that you have not thought about, things that you have like ignored, because products have gotten so complex nowadays. I don't think anybody out there can like meaningfully understand ChatGPT, the entire product. And so when you're in that kind of a situation, and it's only going to get harder and harder for any one person to fully grok the entirety of your product. So in those cases is where first observability, instrumentation, and analytics are going to be extremely valuable. And then you have experiments. And these experiments, they don't have to be like these, hey, let's test these two different variants. It could literally be like, I believe in this feature. Let's imagine like I'm going to build this new feature. I'm going to launch this feature. That is your hypothesis. The hypothesis is like, I'm going to build this feature. This feature is going to be good for whatever reason, right? So for my customers, it's going to be better. For my business, it's going to be better. For my developers, it's going to be better. Something's driving you to go build that feature. That is your hypothesis. Validate it. So like put it out there and measure how much it's actually like improved in all of those dimensions that you just thought about. And then the other one is like how much it's actually affected. So what did it cannibalize? What did I not know about this product? So yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about growth. I mean, you started in 2021. Can you give a scale about like how many customers are using Statsig or how many users or, just the scale of the company right now?
Yeah, so we have about a couple thousand users. Most of them come self-serve. They like pick up our product. We have like all kinds of open source SDKs. We have a few hundred enterprise customers that are using our product at scale, and then we have a massive scale in terms of like the each one. So if you think about like the few hundred customers that I just talked about in an enterprise segment, they all have big data. So each one of them have immense amount of data, and then we imagine like aggregating hundreds of that, and then running pipelines on each one of them, keeping the data separate. And we process about like 4 petabyte of data every day. which is mind-boggling to me. And then so last September, we announced that we were processing about 1 trillion events every single day. Now we're processing about 1.6 trillion events every single day. So just to put that in perspective, that's about 18 million events every second. And so that's what our system is processing. So that's kind of like been our growth in terms of like customers, in terms of like scale and infra.
So how are you talked about that positioning? Now, are you positioning Statsig, primarily as a developer tool and focused on marketing and positioning for developers, and using that to drive enterprise growth, or how does the growth engine at Statsig look like?
Yeah, so we position ourselves as a product development platform. So it caters to the engineers, it caters to the product managers, marketers, and data scientists. And so there are parts of the product that each individual, like, so if someone comes to us and say like, hey, we need to solve our experimentation problem, usually it's a data scientist team that is like coming to us with like, need for advanced statistical methods and data sanity. And so we work with them. But then once we're in that particular company, then so our product, we don't block anyone. We don't like charge for seats. We let the product grow organically within that company. So natural extensions are like the engineering team will adopt Statsig for feature flagging, and then the product team will adopt Statsig for analytics and visualization, and so on. So this kind of like, and the marketing team will adopt Statsig for our visual web editor, and so on. The organic growth happens within a company, and this is kind of like how we have grown even within our existing customer base.
Where do you spend most of your marketing efforts, which has been like highest ROI as a channel or as a strategy?
So there are different outcomes for our marketing efforts. So some of those are direct response. So we kind of like, feed people into our website, whether it is like signing up for a new account, self-serve, or whether it is talking to our sales team. So those kind of like, we track, and, it's a very seasonal thing. It depends on like, which, there are times when one surface is doing better than the other, and so we just like keep track of that. We're highly data driven. Then there is like aspects of marketing that are kind of like more brand related. So we want to be out there. We want people to know about us. So like build our brand awareness. And so we invest in like certain things. Like I think one of the fun things that we did last year was a billboard takeout in San Francisco. That was really cool because we got a lot of like brand awareness from that. And then we also partner with people like you, people like some of the podcasts that we work with, some really, really good folks that have a great reach and brand awareness.
In terms of culture, I think in our previous conversation you mentioned you're a completely in-person company, right? I think you're following Facebook in that in that line. So give me a sense of why that matters, and is that because at the stage you are in, or does like what's your view and why it has to be in person?
So our product teams are all in person. There are our sales team is spread out in the U.S. There's like some in the Bay Area, some in New York because of like time zone. There's a couple people in London, so we have to do the sales team on field. But everyone else, the engineering, product, data science, design, marketing, we're all in person in Bellevue. It started out as like there were 8 of us. We started, on day one, and it started out as like, like early days. There's so much decisions that we have to make. There's like all of these whiteboarding that we're doing. It would be very, very hard to like do all of those over Zoom or any other VC. So we kind of like naturally gravitated towards doing this in person. And I saw how fast we were able to move by not having to like document all of the decisions that are made, but then actually like take the decisions and go implement them, within hours. And so the clock speed was extremely high. And I was like reluctant to ever lose that. So it's one of those trade-offs where we've had so many really, really good people we had to say no to because they were like not in a willing to do this in person. So that's the trade-off. And so it was a painful trade-off. But 4 years in, we're still like in person. We're about like 100 people like sitting here, showing up 5 days a week. And it's a self-selection mechanism. There's a lot of positives that we get out of it. There's a lot of relationships that people have built. In Seattle in summer, people like form groups and then they go hiking together, or they go swimming together. It's kind of like a really good community that we've built, and I like it, and I want to keep going as long as I can.
In terms of attracting talent, I think each company, like if you look at Facebook, it's sort of, in my view, Facebook is a much tougher place to work with from like the engineering friends that I worked with. But there are two places which are really tough to work. One is Netflix and one is Facebook. In pure engineering roles, I'm speaking about. They hire the best people, they pay the top dollar. Amazon, I've always observed that they take the young people, college grads, and they squeeze them as much talent as possible in the first 3 years, and they get burned out and churn out from the company. Microsoft is a relatively a little bit more. There's a little bit more emphasis on work-life balance. So there are these different ways I think companies position themselves, even though they might not tell you, but this is as just a pure, external observer. And Facebook, for its intensity, they pay accordingly. And Netflix, famously, they say we are not a family. We're assembling a professional team here, and we will treat you like that. If you're performing high, we'll have you here. If you're not performing, you're out of here, right? So there's an intensity level that varies, across. And I think OpenAI asked its employees to be here for 6 days a week, at least last year. I don't know if that still was true, but the intensity matches. Sometimes the pay package doesn't match it, but everyone has their view of how to attract, great talent. So my question to you is, you were in Seattle in 2021. It was hard to hire talent. I think it might, sort of eased in a little bit, but initially, how were you like figuring out to hire, great people?
Yeah, so that's a very, very good question. You you want to hire great people. We want to retain great people. One of the things you touched on is like work-life balance. Um, after managing large orgs of people, the realization that I came to is like, it's not the intensity that matters. It's like what proportion of the time you spend doing on the things you don't enjoy. So if you're doing intense work, but you love what you're doing, you have autonomy, you have no overhead or friction or somebody micromanaging, if you don't have any of those, in general, people love that kind of stuff, and people have um, gratification. They come in excited, they leave exhausted, but they are gratified. At the end of the day, they feel like they did something that was meaningful. As long as you can provide that environment, the intensity can be high, and you don't have to worry about burnout. And so, to me, it's always been that case, as in like, how do I remove friction? How do I remove overhead? How do I remove process? And these are creative people. I want them to be in their element. Can I provide the best working environment for them? So, like we give breakfast, lunch, dinner. We take care of the best healthcare. So things that you can remove from people's minds where they can be as creative as possible. And then, then you can kind of like expect the intensity in a startup. If you're doing a 10 to 5 job in a startup, it's not going to work. You're going to fail instantly. And so people that come into Statsig already are self-selecting into the company, the culture that we have. And, we're not doing anything crazy like 6 days a week, but we are a hardworking group of people. And I like to keep the talent density extremely high, because it actually affects the people that are already here if you don't keep the talent density high. Plus, it also, the reputation spreads and people want to be part of that group.
Are there like interesting hacks, like hiding from a specific college, or like just like a customer profile, right? What does a talented person profile look like?
No, it's not like okay, well, I'll tell you what this. The one thing that we did extremely well was the first year, very first year, 3, 4 months in, we had 4 interns. So we reached out to some of our alumni network, and then like hired 4 interns. They came in. We were lucky because they did so well. We gave them all return offers, and all of them came back the next year. And at that point, we're kind of like so excited. Then we increased that to 8. And so imagine this, right? So we had like, first of all, we had 10 or 11 people and we had 4 interns. And then the next year we had about 25 people, we had 8 interns. And then, so we had such good luck with this internship program that we continued to like, this time around, we're expecting about 20 interns to show up to Statsig. It's an investment, but it's also a great way to like just have a steady pipeline of people that have experienced Statsig, that have like actually enjoyed being here, and they're excited to come back. And so we've built that. And if you're looking for a hack, that's a great hack.
In terms of fundraising, I think you raised your Series B last year, or if I'm not wrong. And you also mentioned, you had to become profitable, or you became profitable. Talk to me about that whole fundraising aspect, of Statsig.
We raise funds. There's many reasons why companies will raise funds. And last quarter we were profitable, and so we kind of like and we had enough cash in the bank that we could like continue on for a long time. But there's also another aspect of like raising funds, which is you open up completely new networks that you didn't have before, and then you actually like change the optics of the company. So one of the things that I've noticed is like there's a small tranche of people that are willing to like take the risk to join a seed stage company, and then there's a bigger tranche of people that are willing to like join a Series A company, and then you can keep going, right? So you unlock different tranches of people with varying levels of like risk tolerance. And so one of the things about like if we want to go raise a Series C and we announce a Series C, then what happens is like we will unlock the group of people. There's the people that have different level of risk tolerance that we are now able to go higher. So that's an important element of like why raising funds actually helps, even if you don't need the money.
Let's talk a little bit about AI. AI is obviously all the rage in the narrative. Um, I think there are some of AI companies using Statsig. Does, how these companies using Statsig change if it's an AI company? Is there a option to integrate with uh, LLMs? Like, do you have to extend your product when LLMs come into the picture? Or are you thinking about those things? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are various products that we offer. So if you're a consumer of LLMs, we have an SDK that you can then use to like actually consume these APIs, where we will automatically track your latency, your token length, and then eventually like how your product is doing, and then tie it all back to like, okay, well this combination of like the prompt and the model that you used, and the input parameters like frequency, penalty, temperature, all of those you used, is resulting in these, kind of like the quantification of the lift or regression. So we do all of that. So we have SDKs for that. We also have in the product prompt experiments. So that look, there's going to be a lot of people building different kinds of prompts and wanting to validate how each one of them is performing for different tasks. And so we have a very specialized experimentation product that is like just prompt experiments. It makes it extremely simple for you to like run different prompt experiments. But the rest of it is just like a very powerful platform that you can then use for anything. Like when if you're OpenAI, you're running experiments on ChatGPT, that's going through Statsig, and or if you're like Notion, where you are a consumer of like AI and LLMs, and then you pass it through Statsig. So Statsig powers you to determine which models work, which combination. It's a combinatorial problem. Which combination of all the parameters that you send is yielding better results, and so on. So that's like how Statsig is a tool for all the companies that are consuming AI. Then the next part is like, how does Statsig use AI to make our customers' experience better? So there's a lot that we're doing there. I'll be announcing those in the next few months or so. Some of the areas in which we're doing this kind of work is we have, for a given company, we have historic data about a user, and so about what they've done, what kind of like historic event stream that they have sent over, so that it's easy for us to build models on top of that and start predicting. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to invest in.
And was it mainly because traditionally we've been using ML models on that side sort of data and giving insights before? Like, is there a new unlock with LLMs, or are you deploying just more traditional ML models?
Yeah, no, it's what the industry has done to transformers is like so amazing. So what used to be such a niche concept is now so readily available as APIs that you can start like you can pick any transformer, not generally, not even generative transformers, just any transformer, a predictive transformer. You can start using that with your data, and so some of those have become extremely accessible. So that's what is like so good about
So,
the
did the pricing for these models also come down a lot?
yeah. So the what is the saying? So if it's too costly for you today, still keep doing it because next month it's going to be cheap enough.
Because I think a lot of people who not in engineering don't realize that ML has been there, been integrating in all these products
Yes.
forever, right? We've been using ML, especially in performance or insights. Wherever there is data, we've been applying ML models quite aggressively in every company,
Yep.
and it's like people are still using ML models and creating features, but they can announce it as like, hey, these are all the things that we're doing for AI, which is technically true, but
Yeah.
the focus and the narrative is suddenly more important now because of those things.
Yeah, I think if you take ML, yes, you're absolutely right. This has been around for like, couple decades now. The thing is like only large companies with lots of funding had access to those kind of like, I want to be able to train them. But now what has happened is like that access has been democratized where everyone can get hold of this for cheap.
Yeah, and I remember the stat because I work in storage. I think a terabyte used to cost some $6,000 25 years back, and it costs like a cent now. So that's the graph continues to drop every 2 years, every 3 years, and every time like someone says it's too costly, then I basically show that graph.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the storage graph, look at the compute graph, and look at the businesses built on top of that, because there's always this argument that these are so costly, how can we build a legitimate businesses on top of that? And then I point out storage business is going down, you have three big clouds at scale building very large businesses out of this. Right? So the whole I forgot what Javant's paradox that comes into picture when you reduce the cost dramatically down. um, in terms of Statsig, do you have like a favorite failure, like a failure or a deal that fell through that, sort of, things changed? I mean, was a crucial failure, but, things changed because of it?
Yeah, I mean a lot. But one thing that I want to call out is like, where it's a humbling experience when you realize you will never be always the first one to come up with the best ideas. And there will always be other people, sometimes ahead of you, sometimes behind you, that are coming up with like brilliant ideas. And so part of it is like, learning to acknowledge that that's a good idea, learning to give them credit for the idea, and then quickly follow on, which is like if it is a great idea and you believe that's the great idea, without any ego, just go and build it. And so if you can build it better than anybody else, then you continue to live on for a couple more days. And so that's always been the philosophy of Statsig, which is like, the moat is not the ideas, the product that we currently have. The moat is the ability to out execute anyone else. And so, if from that angle, we famously didn't take warehouse seriously in the first year or so. So warehouses have been getting more and more adoption, starting to become the infrastructure and the foundation. And we built everything on the cloud without really like taking in consideration the warehouses like Snowflake or Databricks or Synapse or Redshift or so on. And then we started seeing customers come in with like things like, "Hey, I have Snowflake or I have Databricks. Could you operate on that?" And we would be like, "Well, you can ingest data from there, but I can't operate on top of it. Why would you want to do that?" You see, you kind of like start to believe in your like the current products, and then you realize that they start to leave and like, oh, Statsig is not the right product for us. And so you have a couple of those failure or humbling moments. You start to like, wait a second, our position is not right. So we need to like really rethink. So then we spent the next 3-4 months building a warehouse native product, and then we came back to the industry, and then we started selling our products. So that was a very very good kind of like a failure realization and then action from the realization.
We're almost at the end of our conversation, and I ask all my guests a couple of common questions. So the first question is, what are you consuming right now? It can be anything, books or movies or TV series. That is interesting.
I'm a big Audible guy, so I listen to books on my way to work and back. Right now, I'm consuming Brian Greene's what's the word, The Elegant Universe. So I think this is the second time I'm reading it. I just wanted to like just listen to it all over again, and every time I feel like I catch on something new from that book.
Interesting. Um, what do you know about founding a startup that you previously didn't know that you wish you know when you started it?
Oh, thousands of things.
I feel like we
um,
already had this conversation.
oh yeah. No. There's I mean every day I feel like dang it, I wish I had known, when I started. Okay, so the biggest one I think I mentioned is like, I wish I had spent more time with my sales and marketing friends back at Facebook. They're all there. We're all good friends. I'm still in touch with all of them. We used to sit with like, leads meeting every week for an hour. We talk about all the things, but I never once thought to like go drill down deeper. It's like, well, how is your team structured? How are they incentivized? What kind of commissions do they get? How do you think about like these 6, 7 different types of marketing: event marketing, content marketing, brand marketing, performance marketing, demand gen? It's like I wish I had learned all of those stuff, so I could have like saved a lot of failures early days. Yeah.
Um, for you, I have a special question, which is, what is a big company perk that you miss?
A big company product that I miss.
Perk.
Oh, perk. Recruiting team. If I could
What,
like say,
what is it that you don't miss?
oh, a lot of things. A lot of things. I mean, a big company, you kind of like you're sitting in review after review after review, and those are like not just product reviews. You're like looking at privacy reviews and security reviews, and things that are like important stuff, but actually end up being like an overhead for some of the things. So those are necessary and important components of a large company. But one of the things that the startups you can like move extremely fast by passing a lot of those stuff, or even if you have to take care of them, those are like much smaller deal.
With great scale comes great responsibility.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good note to end our conversation. Vijay, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Nataraj.